Hi, good morning, everyone. I think we got a lot of people just settling in, getting logged in. So I'm going to give everybody a couple minutes to take their seats, if you will, and then I'll jump into this webinar on caregiver applicant data that we've collected so far in 2023. So I'm just going to give everybody probably till like 2-3 minutes after the hour to get all logged in. Grab your coffee, grab your water, whatever it may be, your lunch perhaps, and then we'll get started. So I'm just going to hang out here for a second and wait for everybody to get logged in. So just give us just a couple minutes here. So if you just joined, we are just hanging out for a couple minutes while everybody takes their seats and grabs their coffee, but I'm going to get started here real soon because I want to be respectful of everybody's time and get this rocking and rolling. So with that, looks like we've got a good number of people here. So I'm going to start in on the subject for today. And just as a heads up, I'll go over this in a second. We're recording this one. So if you have a colleague who's not able to make it today and you want to share this with them, it'll be available after the presentation on our website, and we'll email it out and all that good stuff. So no need to worry about taking notes, or if you have somebody that you know that wanted to see this and wasn't able to make it. So awesome. So what we're going to talk about today is the caregiver applicant data that Augusta has collected so far this year in 2023. And originally it was going to be 4 data points that I was going to talk about specifically. And then we found one more that was very interesting and super relevant for home care agencies. So you'll notice here it's no longer 4, 5 data points that will make you rethink how you're hiring. So let me go ahead and jump in. So Zoom instructions real quick. I know everybody's zoomed out, right? We've been on a million Zooms. But just as a reminder, there's that Q&A button there. Feel free to chat in your questions. I have that panel open on my screen. So when I see them come in, I'll take a break and answer your questions. You don't have to save them till the end. You can just ask as they come up for you. And as I said, the recording is going to be available in an email to you and on our website just after this. So let me introduce myself. It's a little meta here. I've got a picture and me on video, but I'm Jen Waldron. I'm one of the co-founders of Augusta Home Care Recruiting. I started in this industry as a caregiver all the way back in 2009. I had no gray hair back then, and now I've got enough. I spent the rest of my career up until this point growing 2 different online caregiver training companies, the Institute for Professional Care Education and then Care Academy. Just a little bit about me personally. I have a dog who is like possibly objectively one of the most cute dogs on the planet. Her name is Tina. She's awesome. So I spend a lot of time with her. Spend a lot of time playing the keyboard. If you can see that in the background, my little office area here. And because of my experience having been a caregiver in the situations that I think everybody on this call today probably has dealt with, I had to deal with it on the end of caregiver, my colleagues calling out and then me having to pull a double. I'm really passionate about caregivers, their quality of life, and seniors and their quality of life, and how we can make that inherent interdependence between the two even better for everybody involved. So very passionate about senior care and home care in particular, because that's where most people want to be, is in their home. So just a little bit about me so you can get to know me. Go to the next page here. So as I present this data, I do have a challenge for you. And I know it can be tough to be challenged sometimes, but I think it's worth it because of the data that we have and what we've discovered and some of the other things I've learned about hiring through the research and just studying that me and my team have done. So the question I want you to focus in on today as I present this information is I want you to think about how you decide whether or not a candidate is actually qualified. Um, it seems like a simple question because you probably have a list of things in the back of your mind, or your recruiter does, that they're thinking about when they're looking at a resume or an application, or in that first interview. But my challenge to you today is going to be to think about whether or not it's systematic, basically, and how you have decided what that process is, and how you continue to make choices about what it is moving forward. So that's my challenge to you today. I did put this little image here of the coin toss. It's a little bit of foreshadowing. So you'll see what I mean on the next page here. So one of my favorite books about recruiting and hiring is called The Who Book. I don't know if anybody out there has read it, but it's totally worth your time. It's like incredibly good data and a really well thought out strategy for hiring that can be used to, that can be applied to really any job role, basically. So in the Who Book, and I don't work for them or anything, I just really love the book. But in the Who Book, they studied hiring from over 300 CEOs. They did over 1,300 hours of interviews with them. And one of I put the two key takeaways that I think are relevant for this discussion today. So the first is, unfortunately, and I'm going to say unfortunately because I have been there. When I was growing those two online training companies for caregivers, I hired a lot of salespeople, made a lot of terrible decisions. Nobody's perfect at hiring, right? There's not a silver bullet. But what they found in this book is that about half of companies that they studied admitted eventually that they made the wrong hiring decisions. And the root cause that these researchers found is that a lot of hiring managers, and I'm a victim of it as well, rely on their gut instinct. Basically, that's kind of what it comes down to. We think we know what we're looking for, but we don't always do it systematically. We're people, right? We kind of get a gut feeling when we meet a candidate, or when we look at a resume. If it's formatted really nicely, oh wow, what a nice surprise to see a beautiful resume. You know, there's all these things that kind of play into that gut feeling, and sometimes it's not conscious. You know, so part of what my point here is, and their point in the book, is to become aware of that and just become conscious of that idea that sometimes you do get a gut feeling and you might follow it because we're just people, right? The second key point that they make in this book is that developing a systematic strategy for specifically what questions to ask, when to ask them, and why is absolutely crucial to helping you remove yourself from your gut feelings. And their strategy that they lay out in this book, a key part of it is making sure that you ask the same question multiple times in different ways. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when I start to share the actual data that we have. But the other thing is I wanted to mention, if anybody wants to take a closer look at this book, you can obviously get it on Amazon or whatever. But I can send you a link to, they have a whole bunch of templates of how to create a scorecard. If you haven't ever gone through that process before, it's a very valuable thing to do. It's very similar. If anybody here is familiar with like general sales and marketing ideas, it's very similar to the idea of creating an ideal customer profile. Like, for instance, maybe you've had the experience of taking on a client who it turned out their needs were kind of different than what you could actually provide. And maybe that's because they didn't really fit the mold, the ideal profile of the person that you wanted to care for. It's the same exact idea with a candidate that you're hiring, where you can really create a very black and white, systematic way to identify the key skills, behavioral factors, location, experience level, all these different things that may play into that idea of who is your ideal candidate profile. So that's what these scorecards are. So if you want those, I can send you a link to them. They're free on the website of the Who Book authors. Awesome. So hey, I just wanted to mention, if you just joined, feel free to use the Q&A button in the Zoom toolbar if you have any questions as I'm going along. And just a quick exercise before I move on to my next data points that may challenge your idea of how you qualify a caregiver. Just in the Q&A box, if you want to type in real quick, how long do you look at a resume or an application before you decide whether or not they're qualified? You want to just throw an answer into the Q&A or the chat? Okay, so it looks like we've got some people saying a few minutes per resume. And other people saying a little bit longer, 15 minutes per resume. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So I guess from the responses we've gotten so far, it looks like people think it's a few minutes of looking at the resume or the application before they decide whether or not this is a good enough candidate to be able to call or text. We've got some other people saying that they just get a gut feeling right after the interview, which is totally normal. I've been there. I've been there. Yeah, so anybody else on how fast you get a gut feeling about a candidate in their first interview? One person said it's right after the interview. Anybody else? Does it ever happen right away when you meet a candidate? I know it's happened to me. Sometimes it has to do with, just like our personal feelings, like where they seem like relatable to us, in some way, like they seem like a person that, that we might know in our personal lives, and so for that reason, they just kind of stand out to you a little bit. No, I've had that experience before. Anybody else on the gut feeling? Yeah, one person says within seconds. One person says just within the first few questions. I agree. Yeah, yep, definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your participation in that quick exercise. Now I'm going to hit you with some data on those questions. Okay, so from Indeed.com, on average, employers look at resumes for 6 to 7 seconds. They basically take a brief glance. Do they see the keywords? Does it look okay? And then make a decision about whether or not they are going to contact them or not for an interview. From the Society for Human Resources Management are the second two bullet points here. Most hiring professionals say they make a hiring decision within the first 5 minutes of each interview. However, their article that this is from, which I've got linked down here, says there's little evidence that hiring decision based on first impressions and gut feelings are effective. And the Society for Human Resource Management, by the way, they're like human resources across many industries. It's kind of like an advocacy and education group. They've got some really interesting articles and data and stuff about HR related topics. But in there, they through a study that they did in conjunction with Bamboo HR, which is a really big HR payroll company, or onboarding company, I guess. They do a lot of things, but they found that 1/3 of new hires quit within the first 6 months, and that's across all different industries. I don't think I need to belabor the point about the turnover rate in our industry. I mean, it's way higher than 1/3. Like it's usually 65%, I think, for the last 3 years, right? According to Home Care Pulse. So, but even across other industries, the Society for Human Resource Management and this survey that they did, they're making this connection between potentially the hiring decision and the turnover rate. which, I mean, I think there's a myriad of factors in our industry that are a little bit different. We're dealing with frontline workers who are generally, I mean, a financially sensitive group of people. So there's other factors I think that would play into it as opposed to like a white collar job, if you will. But even still, it's pretty meaty data in terms of what it says about like the way we're thinking about who is a qualified candidate. So I hope that sits okay with you guys. I'd love for your, I'll after this, I can also share the slide deck so you can check out those links as well to read a little bit more about that process and what's been going on in the world generally when it comes to how we evaluate candidates. Okay, so now I'm going to go into what the data is, where the data is from that we are actually sharing today from Augusta. So if you have never heard of Augusta before, what we do is we've developed software which connects to job boards and automatically qualifies candidates based on 15 different home care specific criteria. It also geolocates the candidates in relation to the zip codes where your clients live. So that's the general idea of what our software does. Today, we're processing about 4,000 applicants per month and through our software. So the candidates, the perspective of the candidate is that it's a job application. They don't realize that it's anything other than a job application, and then they're actually being qualified at the same time. So that there's about 4,000 applicants a month that are going through the software. Of those 4,000 applicants, 90% of the candidates coming through our software complete all 15 screening criteria. So it means we've got this like massive data set on these 4,000 applicants a month. And then in terms of where our customers are using this, because obviously the source matters in terms of like which specific job board. Some job boards seem to work better for certain areas of the country or places in a city than others. So our customers, where they're using this primarily are Indeed.com, their social media recruiting ads, their own websites, and Craigslist. Those are the top places where applicants are being funneled through our software from. But they do also use it on other job boards, and they also use it in like text and email campaigns to previous or old applicants, or like if they have a list of candidates that they may have gotten from a job fair or a CNA school or something like that. Okay, so if there's any questions about what the data is that we're going to look at or where it's come from, just feel free to chat it in and let me know. Now I'm going to go to the first very interesting data point. So this one wasn't, we didn't realize it immediately. And so I didn't actually put it in my list of what I was going to cover today. So this is the extra fifth bullet point that or data point that I'm covering today. So I'm curious if anybody has any idea what their numbers are. If you happen to know how many caregivers live within the right location for your agency from the applicants that you get on all your various job boards and ways of marketing to candidates. I think people tend to, based on the data that we've collected and how statistically significant it is, the fact that it's 4,000 applicants a month, like this is a strong, solid data set from Indeed and social media primarily. We're seeing that 44%, and there are other, as I said, there are other job boards in there too, Craigslist and each individual company's own careers page on their website. Applicants, 44% of applicants live further away than 15 miles from the agency that they just applied for. And only 56% of applicants actually live within that 15-mile radius of the agency that they applied for. So I'm sure that everybody on this call has had this experience where you have a caregiver who says, oh, they live kind of far away, and they say that they really want this job, that they can do it. And then they, at some point in the relative near future, probably within the first 90 days, start ghosting. And we found at Augusta, one of the factors there is where they live. We actually have interviewed a lot of caregivers as a part of creating this software. And one of the things that we found from applicants is that when they want a job and they need a job, they need it now, right? They're motivated to do it now. There's those candidates who just want to get it and like need that paycheck, right? And so they'll say what they need to say to make it happen. Like that's a group of candidates out there. But the reality is it's just not long term for them. In fact, we've had caregivers who have even told us that they would take a job if it was closer to them, potentially for the same or less money, basically. That was an actual quote from a caregiver that we interviewed, that if it was only a mile from their house, that they might be willing to take less money because it would be so convenient for them. So the location to the caregiver is very important. The location to the agency is very important, because the other thing is a lot of times, and I'm sure you all are familiar with this too, in your specific service area that you serve, your caregivers don't always live super close to where the clients live. Like there might be a wealthier neighborhood and might be like a little bit more lower economic neighborhood, and so there might be a commute time in there. So it can be quite difficult to find the people in the right locations that also have all the other things that you want your caregiving team to have. So I just made a couple notes here. These 40% of agencies are citing that they use Indeed as their top recruitment source. And a lot of this 44% is from Indeed. In fact, 10% of the Indeed applicants were more than 15 miles away were also outside the country. So it's unfortunately like a kind of a big waste of time for the recruiter or whoever the hiring manager is to have to basically, I mean, if you get really narrow on who your ideal candidate profile is and literally where they live, like draw a radius around it, and what's going to be a good long-term fit for you, that means it's probably not more than 15 or 20 miles. Depends on your service area. If you're in a rural service area, then maybe it's 30 miles, right? Because there's no traffic. But if you're in an urban area, probably 15 miles is even too far. It's probably more like 8 or 10 miles potentially. But regardless, basically it means 44% of your time is being spent on candidates likely that are not going to be a long-term fit for you. They may solve an immediate need of I'm hiring urgently today, but it's going to continue to perpetuate that problem of the turnover rate. So how do you ensure that the location, these are sent down the bottom here, a couple questions for you to think about as when you leave this conversation today. How do you ensure that the location is a part of your qualification process systematically? So my first suggestion for you is, as I mentioned, the Who book has those scorecards where you can basically add that as a part of your ideal candidate profile, that they live within a certain area. So that's one way to do it. Of course, Augusta does that automatically, but there are certainly other ways to do it as well. And I guess my other question related to that is, what is your recruiter going to do with 44% more of their time back in their day when, they don't even bother with a candidate who's 20 miles away because they know it's not going to be a long-term fit. I mean, there might be some exceptions to the rule out there, but if you look at from a high level, who are the candidates that have actually stayed with you for a long time? What are the attributes of those people? Where do they live? What do they like to do? Do they have a family? Like, what is their schedule like? Look at those types of factors about who that candidate is, and then create that profile of what you're looking for. So that way you can just say black or white, yes or no, this is a good fit or a not fit. And it removes your gut from it, right? Because somebody, sorry, I feel like I'm belaboring the point, but somebody may tell you, like they may give you such a convincing argument about how they're going to be able to show up, even though they live 45 minutes away. And you want to believe them, right? Like, because like we didn't get into this industry because we don't like care about people, right? So it's hard to remove your gut from that sometimes. So having a ideal customer profile and a systematic way of identifying how this candidate meets that is really important. Okay, so next up, how many experienced caregivers are applying to jobs right now? This is actually a little bit higher than I thought it was. Based on like looking at the data as it comes in on a regular basis, I thought it was closer to about 30% of caregivers that are new to the industry. But when we actually did a quantitative analysis on this, it's about half, 48.5% of caregivers in the market today say that they are either brand new to this industry or they've cared for friends and family. So this image on the right here is how we asked the question to the candidate. So the 48.5% includes the first two answers, and the some experience includes basically either some combination of the last three answers, essentially. That's how we totaled it up. So, I mean, it's pretty eye-opening, right? Knowing that up to potentially half of the candidates in the market right now are people who don't really have experience being a caregiver. I think that's, in my history in this industry, I think that's a pretty significant increase from what it used to be. I mean, I think there's always been a lot of people who are who dip their toe into healthcare by being a caregiver, but I think if there's some data out there, you know, about how the Great Recession has changed the caregiving profile as well. And I actually have an article on that that I'm happy to share too. I do think this is an increase from what it has been. So it makes you ask some questions probably about how you're marketing your jobs, right? And also, what are the types of support systems that you have and may want to add to your business to make sure that you can capture the people, the candidates that are actually going to be qualified from this group. So I assume everybody out there has a training program of some kind. I think when you market that, you know, thinking about how you can not just tell them once about it, but make sure it's in every part of your job marketing and remarketing it when you're in an interview with somebody that you know is new to the industry. I think also, if you don't yet have a career advancement program of some kind, even if it doesn't have to be incredibly sophisticated, but offering this group of people, the new caregivers, some semblance of an understanding of how they get to either move up, move laterally, or how you help them move on in this industry. Because maybe they're not going to be your caregiver forever. Statistically, they will not. But there is a relationship there where you can tell them that they're supported even when they leave your specific agency. So maybe you develop a partnership with a local community college or a home health agency that's doing skilled care, where you can help somebody get experience at a different level if they are, you know, wanting to continue to grow and it's not necessarily within your company. So making sure that you have some semblance of a career advancement program that you can market to this group and continue to remarket to them through the interview process and through their first 90 days is, I think, going to be really important for capturing the attention of this group and maintaining it. Hey, let me know if you have any questions, guys. Okay, so how many applicants are already registered or certified? So based on the last information that I gave you, I think this is not going to be a shock, but it is much higher than I thought it was going to be. So that was kind of a surprise to me. So this data is a combination of all of our customers' states. And we do have the bulk of our customers in California. So that's why I'm calling out California. But we look at a variety of different registration and certification types, depending on what state it is. So that's why you're seeing these different acronyms here. On the right-hand side, I've got an example of what the question is structured as for our California customers. But if you can imagine are you registered in your state? These would be different options depending on what state our customer is in. So yeah, fortunately, unfortunately, I mean, this is just the truth of the matter. 62% of candidates are neither registered nor certified in California or whatever state they're in. So we have a lot of customers in Oregon, Washington, Texas, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Massachusetts, a few other states that I'm probably forgetting, but when you total that up, it's more than half of people have never been registered as anything related to being a caregiver. And then you can see I put down here the registration rates for the other options that were selected. So only 17, if you're in California, I'm so sorry, only 17%, 18 if you round up, of candidates are already registered as an HCA. So I know I've talked to a lot of agencies who want to hire people who have already been registered, but the truth of the matter is I just don't think that there's enough of those candidates out there to sustain that way of doing business, basically. And again, this is a challenging thing to talk about, right? Because it means we may have to think differently about how we approach the business. But it just doesn't, the data doesn't reflect that there's enough candidates to be able to, that are already registered to support that strategy of only hiring candidates who are already registered. So if you are in the state of California, can you offer, these are my, thoughts for you, not telling you have to do this, of course, it's just a, a thought, right? Like, is there a way that you could offer some sort of HCA reimbursement program? Or if you're in a state that doesn't have that type of requirement, they have a different level of skill set that the state is looking for. Can you develop partnerships with CNA schools or HHA schools or community colleges? So that way you can help provide more tangible career advancement to that large group of people who have a desire to get registered or certified. Or if you're in one of those states, other states where they do have some sort of similar HCA requirement like Washington, same idea there. Can you offer either your own training program to make sure these people get registered, or can you help reimburse some of the costs of them doing it themselves? So yeah, let me know if there's any questions on this. I'm gonna keep rocking and rolling here. Okay, so which benefit is most important to caregivers? So in our software, we identified 5 categories that came up in our interviews that we've done, that we did as research to create our software. So these 5 categories are very specific because it's literally what caregivers told us they were looking for. And we wanted to get a sense of how many caregivers are really interested in each type of benefit. So the vast majority of candidates, the first thing that's important to them is flexible hours, which is a little bit surprising, right? But it kind of makes sense because I think when you think about who's a caregiver today, they usually have their family responsibilities. They have like their own personal caregiving responsibilities that they need to deal with. And a big part of that is being able to, if their kid is sick at school, they may need to go pick them up and there might not be anybody else to do it. So having that flexibility in their schedule and giving them a way to be able to manage that, their own personal caregiving responsibilities with their work caregiving is really important to a lot of people. And then you can see here, I put the, in descending order here, the interest in the other benefits that we listed. Overtime pay is important. And then after that, I mean, really health insurance and easy commute came up as tied. Paid time off surprisingly kind of came up as last, but I think that my interpretation of this from the interviews that we've done with caregivers on what's important to them, like from a qualitative perspective, is that they may not believe that paid time off is really an opportunity for them. Like they may see it, I think they see it more as a part of the flexibility of their schedule. Like they almost like they don't believe it's gonna happen kind of with paid time off in some cases, but they do believe, hey, maybe there's a way for me to be able to like shift my schedule around easier. So that way I can like get to my kids when I need them or get to my family, whoever it is. So a couple of thoughts for you about how you can use this information. So obviously the first thing that comes to mind is like how you're highlighting the flexibility of their schedule in your job ads and in your interview process. So I hope and perhaps if you don't yet have a plan of how you help manage flexibility for candidates, then this may make you think about, okay, maybe we need to make a little bit more of a robust plan also. The other thing that has come up in other research that I've done, and I put a link to it down here, is that the candidates that are in this persona that want flexible hours, they seem to be related to a much bigger trend in the economy right now, which is what the article down at the bottom is about. They identified 5 different different personas that are in the job market today, and one of the personas lines up almost exactly with this data. Basically, they call it the caregiver persona, literally. And the thing that they want the most, one of their big sticking points, is that they, like I said, they have that family responsibility that they are primarily in charge of. And so parental leave is one of the things that they want, and that flexibility related to how when they need to care for their family, how they can get that time off and still be able to come back to work. I'm not saying any of this is easy, by the way, just for clarity's sake. I realize like these are not simple things to solve, and figure out a way that you can offer it sustainably to your group of caregivers. But it is definitely important data to consider in your process of designing a benefits program and marketing it. Okay, so last but not least, we ask all of the candidates coming through our software whether what days they're available to work and what times they're available to work. However, we did an A/B test on this. You can see on the right-hand side here, we found that asking the question in the negative format is much more accurate in terms of the information that they give. I'm sure if you're here, you've probably had that experience where you asked a caregiver what their schedule was, when they were available to work, and they ended up being a little bit overconfident about it and telling you that they could work anytime, and then it didn't turn out to be the case. So asking the question in the negative format has helped us get better information on that. And then going back to the WHO book and the strategy that they laid out, I think this is part of asking the same question 2 times in different ways. So if you're asking it up front when you qualify the candidate, and then you also reconfirm it in the interview, I think you're going to get much better data on like what's really accurate for that particular caregiver. So as you can see here, it's what we all kind of had been feeling in the market, because I hear this from home care agencies a lot, that is very difficult to staff the weekends. And almost 46% of candidates coming through here said that they can't work on some weekend day, basically. It wasn't all weekend days for everybody, but it was either Saturday or Sunday, some combination of those days. So it's a lot of candidates that say that they are not available on the weekends. So it makes you then consider, if you don't already have differential pay for the weekend, that's definitely something to think about. Or if you have some sort of advancement program that's tied to their pay, maybe worth considering how pitching in on the weekend kind of plays into your advancement program with your candidates, because it's such a large number of people that don't want to work on the weekends. I don't know if anybody knows, but to me, I think it's increased also since the pandemic in terms of like what people are willing to do in terms of their work schedule. I think it's also tied into that idea of flexibility in their schedule, and having people out there today having wanting more control over what their work hours are. So just some ideas for you about how you can potentially overcome this challenging data point, I guess. Yeah. So let me see. I think that was my last data point. I think that was all 5. Yeah, that was all 5. So, and we are just about out of time here today. So if you want, I am going to talk a little bit about Augusta, more specifically in terms of like what we can actually help you with. So if you want to stick around for 5 more minutes, please do so. If you don't have time now, I'd love to talk with you and hear from you later. So you can go to our website and contact us for a demo, give me a call. That's our phone number right there. So, and also just worth mentioning, if you do sign up in April, then we do have a special deal. I realize we're almost at the end of the month, but I'm putting it out there. So let me get into it. So if you wanted the caregiver applicant data, we're done with that. Now we're talking about Augusta more specifically. So about us, we are inbound recruiting built for home care. So as I mentioned at the top, we only work with home care agencies. Me and my 2 business partners are incredibly passionate about it. We work with a bunch of franchises. We work with a bunch of independently owned and operated home care agencies as well. We also, our customers told us they did not want to have to learn any new systems when it comes to recruiting. So we prioritized integrating with as many as we can. And so those are some of the companies that we've integrated our software with. So that way candidates can get automatically sent in there. A little bit more about us. We were founded by caregivers like me and home care industry veterans. So my business partners have also been doing things in home care and senior care for, well, combined over 30 years experience. Also as a part of that experience, recruiting a lot of caregivers. So we've done it personally, like the full cycle of recruiting, not just software to qualify caregivers, like we've done the whole process. I guess the problem that we're really trying to tackle here is that we help home care agency owners that are frustrated by applicants who just feel like they aren't serious about working with your agency. And the owners that we work with, oftentimes they tell us that they're kind of worried. They feel like they're losing candidates to competitors. They may not say that outright, but what happens is you call a candidate and they somehow already have another job interview. And so it feels like they're kind of like leaking out of your hiring funnel somehow. Interestingly, though, when we started to interview agency owners about how we could help with this problem, most owners told my team and I, that they felt like they just needed more volume of applicants. And I think there's some truth to that. And I also think that sometimes that's not the problem. And I'll tell you more about why that is. What we did basically, as you can kind of see from the data that I presented, we developed a data-driven method for home care agency owners and operators to get qualified inbound caregiver leads without chasing any of the unqualified candidates. So you could probably see that from the zip code data and how we geolocate candidates. But there's other criteria as well. So the reason why I mentioned that a lot of agency owners told us that they feel like they just need more volume of candidates, and we think it maybe is a little bit more nuanced than that. We kind of see it as 2 separate problems. Like if you happen to live in an area, a very rural, remote area, where there's just not a lot of people, you're going to have a volume problem. There's no way around it, and we can't solve it, right? That's like, you're probably going to have to dump a lot more money into ads to get more candidates and get any decent volume. So that's like one side of the problem. But if you live in a relatively urban or suburban area where there's people are there, and you get a lot of applicants, but it seems like none of them are serious, it's because of the numbers that we found in the typical hiring funnel. And that's why our software is focused on qualifying the candidates systematically. So we found that only 5 to 10% of applicants ever turn into an interview. So that means somehow you're getting a lot of applications, but none of them are qualified. It seems kind of funny, right? Like, how is it that there's so many applicants, but not enough of them are qualified? Because it's not like we have the highest, I mean, obviously we need people who have a really strong heart and aptitude for this work, but we don't, but it shouldn't be incredibly challenging to get a job at a home care agency, right? Like there's just a few main attributes that we're looking for: dependable, reliable, like they have the right heart, they're willing to learn. Like those are the types of things we want. And it should be more than 5 to 10% of your applicants. And then only 1 to 5% of applicants end up ever getting hired, which I have to credit our customer, Max, who is absolutely amazing. He coined this phrase, so I give him total credit for it. He said it, and he means it in a good way, and it is a good way, but it's also like, and when you think about it from a macro perspective, it makes you wonder what's happening, that it's harder to get into a home care agency than it is to get into Harvard. Like it shouldn't be 1 to 5% of people, right? Like there should be more out there. The other thing that we found is how much time recruiters are typically spending on chasing unqualified applicants. So they're just calling and texting and kind of like almost contributing to the problem of caregivers not really being conscious of which agency they're applying for, because they just keep getting contacted about job after job after job. So recruiters are wasting basically a ton of time on just chasing down candidates that are never going to be qualified for them. They don't even, 44% of them don't even live within 15 miles of your agency. So what we do at Augusta, like what it actually does is, as I mentioned earlier, it is to the candidate, it looks like they're filling out an employment application. They would never know that anything else is happening besides filling out an employment application. And what it lets you do is close the serious applicants as fast as possible. So we designed our software so that way it's just a link, which can be used on any job board. And you can also use it since it's just a link specific to your agency, you can send it out to people in an email, you can send it to them in a text message, you can put it on your website. There's like about a zillion use cases for it. And as I mentioned earlier, it integrates with your other systems. The next big point that we made in terms of how we built the software is that we wanted to make it so that way the candidates who are actually a decent fit for your agency, and we can't qualify everything, right? We have 15 criteria that we qualify them on, including their location, schedule, experience, etc. We want those candidates, the ones that are actually good fit for your agency, to stop applying for other jobs because they already found one that's going to be a decent fit for them. Like today, they typically apply for 16 jobs at one time, and they just don't need to do that. It's a waste of time for everybody, right? So what we do that's really interesting in our software is when we know instantly that the candidate is qualified for your specific needs at your agency, they have the opportunity to self-schedule their interview. So they don't need to keep applying because they already have that conversation set up with your agency. And the feedback that we've gotten from our recruiters is that typically when the candidates who are setting those appointments, they pick up the phone when you call them. And it's partially because we get correct contact information from them, and partially because they were empowered and motivated to say, yeah, I do want that job. That looks like a good agency for me. And then last but not least, what we do is we make it so that way when a recruiter comes into the office, their calendar is just set up with the candidates that are already a good fit for your agency. And you have to do very, very, very little chasing in comparison to the traditional way of recruiting. And the recruiter is also empowered with all this information. So all these data points about their schedule, their experience level, any registrations or certifications that they've had, their geolocation, which we do geolocation by not only their browser data, but also their IP address. So we really know if they're going to be in a good location for you. And so you can really sell them on the benefits that are specific to them because you have the right information about the candidates. So that is what we do at Augusta. Is a mouthful, but as I said earlier, we do have a special for the month of April. So if you're interested in learning about Augusta and think that you may be interested in testing us out, I'd love to talk with you in the next couple of days. Here's a link to our demo, our contact page, excuse me. So that way you can schedule a time for a demo or just give me a call. Or send me an email, whatever works best for you. I'd love to hear from you. So thank you everybody so much for your time today. It was a pleasure to share this information. Like I said, it was recorded. We will send it out within the next day or two from this. So thanks everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday.